Get ready, it's time for the podcast voted most likely to make you say, what the flock? It's the Talking Pools show. And here are your hosts, the dysfunctional duo of myth-debunking pool pros, Rudy Stankowitz and Andrea Nannini.
Hold up, wait a minute.
Hi, my name is Rudy.
And I'm Andrea.
Are you sure?
No, I'm feeling weird today.
And this is the Talking Pools podcast. Welcome to the show. I'm excited.
Hey, everybody. Yeah, are you?
No, not really. I'm actually in kind of a bad mood.
Me too.
Are you? What's pissing you off?
I don't know. Just like I said earlier. Well, we're doing two episodes today, but just everything.
That's pissing you off.
No, not that. Just everything that happens to me. Like, just it's been. You have one of those days where like you wake up irritated, and then just all kinds of irritating stuff happens to you, and then you try your best not to be irritated about it because it's just little things, and you know you're going overboard, or at least like maybe kind of blowing things out of proportion a little bit in your own mind. I'm not talking about blowing up on the lady for giving you the wrong donut or something like that. Just, the earphone issue that I'm having, just my actual phone issue that I'm having. My battery on my laptop is now going out. Just everything at once.
What f***ing lady with a donut?
Oh, I don't know.
Wow. Okay. So I don't even know where to go. All right. Well, here's the cool stuff. So I decided I was going to try something new. And
Okay.
This is something that's been bouncing around in my head for a little while. I decided that I was going to put together a bog terrarium.
Oh, I saw your post.
I know, right? So
Yeah.
It's going to be a bog, which is B-O-G, terrarium. And a bog is somewhere in between regular ground and a swamp.
Okay. I knew
Nutrient-
a swamp had something to do with it.
Super nutrient poor soil, right? It's usually they're put together with carnivorous plants, and that's what I'm doing. So I've got this tank where it opens up in the front, and I put down a layer of horticultural charcoal. So that way the water, because it has to be wet, obviously not swamp
Right.
wet, but kind of like if you walked across gushy land wet.
Gotcha.
Like
okay.
after a rain, how a lawn feels when you're pulling your cart across it and you're just kind of sinking in, but it's not really puddled. So it's got to be kind of like that. So I put charcoal at the bottom so that way it doesn't stink. And then, then the soil itself has to be nutrient poor because it's the poor nutrients that actually cause the plants to evolve to the point that they have to be carnivorous to get the nutrients that they need. So that's why they eat bugs. It's just because the soil conditions were poor, but over hundreds and hundreds of whatever years, they evolved to this point that now, they have to eat the bugs. So the soil
I did not know that.
So my soil can't have nutrients in it, or it'll screw everything up.
So you just put like dead grass in there?
No, I made a mixture of peat moss, perlite, like we use in filters. Yes. Vermiculite, and then sand.
Say it again because you lagged on me. I'm sorry. You said peat moss.
Peat moss, perlite, like we use in filters.
Yeah.
Vermiculite, and
that's for
sand.
floors, right?
For what? Florists?
The
We used to use it.
No. Well, I was saying that.
Most of those things.
Rudy.
three of the things that I just mentioned are things that we used to use underneath the liner of above ground pools.
That's what I was going to say. The vermiculite is what I
Vermiculite?
thought of.
Peat moss before vermiculite, and now they're using sand, right?
I guess so, yeah.
So if you install above ground pools and sand is not what you're using now, send us an email because we think it's sand. So, but I don't install above ground pools, so I think so.
Yeah, we don't see many of them now.
So that's what I made the substrate out of. So I have this charcoal in a tank. I'm sitting there now. I got to wait for rainwater.
Okay.
And of course,
Why
obviously,
rainwater?
because it needs either rainwater or distilled water. I can't use tap water because, again, I want to mimic what's going on in the environment.
Gotcha.
So, of course, now since I put this together, guess what it hasn't done?
Rained.
It has not rained. No. But that's not why I'm grumpy. So anyway, there's no plants in it just yet, but I'll post my progress as I go along. So right now it's just filled with dirt. I do have one plant that's chilling out under a UV light. It's a primrose butterwort. It's not a very large plant, but it is a carnivorous plant. I do have more on the way. So I should end up with pitcher plants and things along those lines and have my own little, shop of horrors terrarium going on here. So that's nice. My goal. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds really cool.
And it's going to feed itself. I'm just going to put it on the back patio where the bugs are and let it eat.
I was going to ask where you were going to put it. So, do you have a screen patio?
I do.
A garden? Yeah.
No, I do have a screen patio, but there's still bugs anyway. There's always bugs. So I'm going to put it back out there. And part of the reason I wanted it in a tank instead of just a bowl is because when we reach the winter months, then I can bring it in and I can just put pinhead crickets in there that I can get from the pet store.
Oh, cool.
And let them eat those. Yeah. And then I'll feed
water.
Feed them throughout the winter. Right. So if I plan for the winter months, but that's not why I'm grumpy.
Hold on. Do you have to change out the water at all or does it just filter itself? Sorry, I just thought of that.
Just going to take care of itself. The plants will use most of it. It'll evaporate. Yep. I should be in good shape.
Cool.
That's not why I'm cranky.
Okay.
That's not why. Well, I'm not cranky. I'm just in a bad mood. That's not why I'm in a bad mood. I'm in a bad mood because the bleeding never stops with this shortage shit.
Oh, God.
It's aggravating as fuck, isn't it? I mean, seriously.
Yeah, it is.
There is nothing that we have.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it before, and I had gone through not being able to get acid. So I had to buy sulfuric acid, and that was just terrible for me. I hated it.
Well, you know what? And in some places they can't get sulfuric acid or sodium bisulfate either. So it's a complete shit show. Like Avery said, right? Shit show.
Yes.
We're completely out of a lot of things. And I think it'd probably be easier. I've asked folks before, what are you out of? But maybe I should just ask people what they have. It'd be a shorter list.
Yeah, I mean, I keep seeing people posting signs from their distributors of just, we're out of this, we're out of this, we're out of this. And it's basically, you could stick your finger on a map and they would be out of something, and if this person's out of this, the next person's out of acid, they're out of chlorine. It's a mess. It really is.
But that's why I wanted to talk about it. And I don't want to talk about the shortage, really. That's not what this one's going to be about. I want to talk about ways to make your current chlorine supply last longer.
Okay.
We already spoke a couple of weeks back about UV and ozone, right? We spoke about saltwater systems so people could, install a salt cell and then that way the pool owner would create their own chlorine from the salt, right?
Yep.
So, and if you are a pool owner listening and you did not know that your saltwater pool is a chlorine pool, surprise, you're a chlorine manufacturer, because that's what they really are.
Yeah.
They're manufacturing chlorine in their backyard. So really what the key things come down to, a couple of basics, right? We need some good housekeeping to go on. The yard has to be in good shape. If you have a screwed up yard, your pool's going to consume more chlorine. What I want is everybody to be able to maintain a chlorine level of 1 part per million throughout the rest of the year, instead of the 3 to 5 parts per million that people normally carry. If we can go at 1 part per million instead of 5 parts per million, that means the chlorine that you have will last 5 times longer.
Yes, I see.
And that might be enough to get you through. Because where's the light at the end of this tunnel, Andrea?
I don't know. It could.
They're telling us it's in April of 22. April of 22. So pretty much a year from now, right? I mean, the folks up north, they're kind of lucky. They're going to close their pool down Labor Day as normal. So even though it's still a few months that we have to get through this, but the folks down south, we're going to be open straight through. So April of 2022. And guess what? It's not going to be like a light switch.
Right. It's going to be.
It's not like all of a sudden the market's going to be flooded with chlorine tablets. These things are going to start to be delivered, but it's going to be a process. So I would guess that we're probably going to have a lot of hiccups throughout 2022 as well. And maybe by the end of that season, fingers crossed, things are running smooth again. But until then, we need to do something to help our existing chlorine supply last. I don't mean, at the manufacturers. I mean at home level, at pool professional level. If you're an aquatics pro at your facility, if you run a water park there, if you're a hotel engineer or an apartment maintenance tech at those facilities, this is where we need the chlorine supply to last. What you've purchased has to last longer. And if you can operate at 1 part per million instead of 5 and keep your pool algae and bacteria free, your chlorine supply will last 5 times longer. That makes sense.
That's super tricky. It does make sense. It absolutely makes sense. But I'm going to have to go and say, I don't see how I would be able to run some of the well, I shouldn't say the commercials because those are constantly fed every day. But 1 part per million would be really hard in my area, especially with
that
the
depends.
rain
You're
and
talking
the
about
sunlight.
Yeah, but you're talking about how you're adding stuff though too, aren't you? I mean, on a 1 a week, because you're using liquid.
Well,
correct?
that's why for residential, I retract the commercial side of it because those are fed every day, and adding you can easily maintain that. I don't think that would be an issue.
Well, it's not an issue. Realistically, there is a solution here. Why are your commercial pools being fed every day? What enables them to do that?
The automation and all and the chemical control.
You nailed it. And are these things not available for residential pools?
They are available, but they are, obviously extra costs, and you still have to fill the chemical tanks.
You're looking at maybe 2 years of this. Like I said, at least 1, possibly 2 years. Do you not think it would be advantageous for the pool owners to purchase automation?
I didn't mean to disagree with you.
No. I'm not yelling at you.
It would be. It sounds like it.
Damn it, Andrea.
It's just your volume. It's just your volume is turned up on my side. But no, that would be a pretty good, decent solution. I mean,
that would be the perfect solution.
If it's maintained, if the customers take care of everything. I'm just playing the devil.
Automation is the perfect solution. But again, you're right. You know what? You have to get the customer sold on this. But most people now know it's trying times. And in trying times, desperate times call for desperate measures. I wouldn't say it's a desperate measure, but as long as these forms of automation, these liquid feeders exist, why not have your customers purchase them from you and install them? And then when you go out, instead of dumping a carboy of bleach into the pool and having it last a week, you could dump the carboy of bleach into the liquid feeder and then have it pump out a steady volume over the week. Wouldn't then?
You have completely just sold me because I have several pools where this would be a miracle solution. So it took me a second to wrap my brain around that. But I mean, like I said, as long as the customer has, some people you don't want touching things because some people will break the stuff.
Well, they shouldn't. They don't need to touch them. You touch them. That's why you're there.
Yeah,
I guess if you're a homeowner and you're on your own and you don't have a pool service company, then you'll be touching it. But outside of that, don't touch it.
No, I get you. It's a pretty good solution. I agree with you. I retract my previous statement.
So, all right. So automation would be huge.
Yes.
What is it? $300-400? I know that sounds like a lot of money, but it's $300-400. Look at the price of a bucket of chlorine tablets on the internet. It's $300-400 is nothing.
Yeah.
And
those are pretty close to $300-400 right now.
We got to start changing the way that we do things. Understand things like this can happen. The pandemic's been has completely screwed up everything. And it's not just the pool industry. So we can't just fault pool industry manufacturers. It's every industry that are facing shortages. Everything from car manufacturers because they can't get those chips, right? There's, you cited the pickle shortage. There's actually rumors of a coffee shortage.
Oh, no.
There's a list of shortages that are going on. Toilet paper, legit shortage right now. Doesn't mean these things aren't on the shelves. It just means there's limited supply. So if people start running around and getting all buck nutty and jiggy with it, then we could be back in that position.
Well, as soon as you say shortage, then you trigger all the hoarders.
Only the ones that listen to us.
Oh. Well, I guess that would be me.
So you're going to go out and hoard. So
everything we just listed, I'm going to go buy.
So we want to maintain that lower chlorine level, and we want to do it successfully. So to do it successfully, we might need a little extra help because a 1 part per million chlorine level is kind of on the low side. Mm-hmm. Even though it's perfectly acceptable, we go with automation so that way we can get that continuous flow. And if you're not using liquid and you already have some type of other feeder, if you have cal hypo and you're using a cal hypo feeder, same. Trichlor, if you do have trichlor tablets and you have your trichlor feeder, the same. We just want to set it so that we're using 1 part per million of chlorine instead of the higher levels. And to help it, we're going to take a look at some algistats and some specialty chemicals because this is where those things really excel. And I'm not always a fan of these items. I was always a minimalist when I would go out and service pools. I would add chlorine, pH, and alkalinity adjusters. That was my thing. And then occasionally I would go with specialty chemicals. But this is a different time. And these things can help us. Like, for example, what about phosphate removers? Are you one that believes in phosphates?
So I actually yes, I am team phosphate remover, but I am also team it only matters until it matters.
Okay, so, explain.
I don't know if I can be on those same two teams. So I used to do, phosphate treatments at the drop of a hat because, especially if I was having trouble holding chlorine, that would be usually my first go-to. I would immediately test the phosphates, and then I would have a high level, or even like 500 I would treat. So I used to do a lot of phosphate treatments, and basically I got real tired of vacuuming to waste.
Vacuuming to waste because some of the brands will precipitate to the floor even though they're not supposed to.
Yes. I haven't found one that reliably doesn't. I don't know if we're talking about brands, but no. There are a couple that I like that don't cause as much crap in the pool that you have to vacuum out.
Crap in the pool.
Yeah.
Again, with the technical terms there.
There we go. Yes, I'm always about technical terms. But then I started to just kind of investigate other reasons why I might not be holding chlorine instead of just immediately jumping to the phosphate removers. And so, yeah, that's my stance on that. Now, if I've had pools where I haven't had chlorine, I've tried Breakpoint, I've tried, algicide, I've tried whatever, clean the filter, and it just still will not hold chlorine. And then that's when I get out the test kit. And if most of them turn a blue color. I don't know if there are other ones that don't. But if it's a real high, real dark blue, depending on the actual level it is, then I will do a treatment. But only if I really, really, really need to.
I was kind of the same. If you've tried everything else and there's nothing left and you're still having some reoccurring problem with algae, test the phosphate level, see where you're at. If it's over 100 parts per billion, remove the phosphates.
There you go, as 100. I couldn't think of the number. The same thing if you have a salt cell, because a salt cell, phosphates naturally coat things. So a level above 100 parts per million can actually make it harder to produce chlorine. Mm-hmm. So in that scenario, I would treat also. Now, I'm older, from the 70s. Okay. So anyway, there was no phosphate removers. People never even said the word phosphate related to swimming pools the first 10 years I was in the industry. That's a favorite argument of the team phosphates don't matter people is that they've been doing it for 67 years apparently and have never used phosphate remover.
67 years. Well, and that's the thing. They haven't, and they've been doing fine. But this is what I want to say. Whether you are on team phosphates or team, what did you call it? Not phosphate remover? Whatever.
Team phosphates don't matter.
No matter what your stance is this year, get the phosphates out of the water because it will enable you to use a lower chlorine level. If for no other reason, if you're above 100 parts per billion, go out, get yourself some phosphate remover, add it to the pool, get that level below 100 parts per billion. It will help you to use less chlorine.
Gotcha.
You know, you could always look into using enzymes on a regular basis, too. You can add those once a week. The cool thing about enzymes is they take care of the people gack. I mean, more than that, too, but the body oils, the lotion, things in perspiration, all of that gunk that usually gives you that black ring on the tile, otherwise floating in the water as well, keeping chlorine occupied when we really just need it to sanitize and disinfect to keep bacteria and algae out of the water. The cool thing about the enzymes is once it grabs this GAC particle, it forms a substrate, then goes through a process, and it frees itself out to go hunt down more people GAC.
What else? What do you think? What about borates? Have you heard much about borates?
I've heard a lot about borates. I have unfortunately not had the chance to use them, so I have no experience.
You're not a borate user. Okay, but that's fine. You work for somebody. You can only put in pools what they let you put in pools.
Yes, and I can only buy what the owner wants to buy. So
right. So that's understandable. So borates, the main reason we use borates in pools is to buffer the pH against an upward drift. What happens when you put it in the water is it creates a buffer. So essentially things that are in the water that would cause the pH to go up, the borate in the water changes it into something else that doesn't drive the pH upward. That's the main reason we use it. But a borate level also serves as an algistat.
Can you explain to me? Oh, you were just about to. I'm sorry.
What an algistat is? Well,
the difference between algistat and algicide, because I don't really know.
Andrea has just asked Rudy to explain the difference between an algistat and an algicide.
You're not going to get very many opportunities of me admitting that I don't know something.
An algistat. All right. So an algicide, right, kills.
Gotcha.
Algicide kills. Algistat prevents, but won't kill. So borate, having a borate level, it serves as an algistat. If you have existing algae, it won't kill it. But if you have borates in the water, it will help to prevent algae from becoming established.
Okay, that makes sense.
Because it creates an unfavorable environment for algae. Because you know what? Algae becoming established is a very critical time for algae. Once it's in there and starts to multiply, it's a lot easier.
Okay.
Because it's already there. It already has a foothold, right? It'd be kind of like if your landlord wanted to throw you out of your house. If he comes by while you're at work, I don't know if you rent, it doesn't matter. But if he comes by while you're at work, he can toss all your shit on the lawn and lock the doors, and you don't even know about it. You come home, you're just locked out. But if he comes by and you're in the house already established, isn't it a lot harder to throw your shit out on the lawn?
Yeah, because you're going to fight him.
Exactly. So it's the same thing. So it prevents the algae from becoming established because it's in the house.
Someone's mowing the lawn. It's in the pool. I got a lawnmower, so if you can hear that, I apologize.
Oh, that's okay. I can't. So we're
my
good.
neighbor is Captain Lawnmower.
Captain Lawnmower. Go back to where we were. Phosphates. Well, first phosphates, because phosphates are algae food. So we want to get the phosphates out of the water, right? That's, of course, after we have good water balance and filtration. Filtration is also important, isn't it?
It is one of the most important things, actually.
And what's the other most important thing?
Disinfection.
So disinfection and filtration are the two most important things. So we don't have a lot of the disinfectants. So what do we need to increase?
Filtration?
Yes. So you should be running that pump more. You should run that filter more because filters remove organics from the water, right? Chlorine, when it's in the water, it tries to sanitize and disinfect all of that stuff. And what happens to chlorine when it sanitizes and disinfects things?
It uses itself up.
Absolutely correct. So if there's less crap in the pool to disinfect and sanitize, doesn't it make sense that it will last longer?
It does make sense, yes.
See? What about cyanuric acid?
You can keep it at a lower level, and so then you can have more, the chlorine can come in contact with any contaminants instead of being held up by the cyanuric acid. So
what Andrea's saying is basically you want to have enough in there to reduce degradation by UV. From the sun, right, from the sun's rays. But you don't want to have so much in there that it slows down how the chlorine works.
Okay.
What about some algicides? Wouldn't that help us to keep algae out of the pool? Or algistats, we've talked about those.
Yeah, algicides, for sure.
Copper sulfate.
Copper?
Yeah, why not? Copper sulfate can be used both as a algistat and an algicide, right? It can prevent algae, can't it?
It can. I've used it before. It comes labeled as 90-day algicide a lot of the time. Well, from where I purchase it from anyway. But every time I've used it, it has turned everything white, a slight blue color.
Slightly blue. So that would be, well, there's always
overdose.
That possibility. It's an overdose. So every time you use it, you put too much in. Is that what you're saying?
It's a possibility.
You just said
I'm not going to deny that.
You did say it was from an overdose.
I said, is it?
I thought you diagnosed it yourself and were just admitting to everybody. Yeah, I just put too much of that shit in and it turned everything blue.
I just dump in some copper and I just let.
Well, after your foam party the other day.
Listen, that grout had deteriorated. There's no grout in that pool, and I think all my soap stuck in the grout line, and that's what happened.
So anyway, copper sulfate, 1-2 punch. All metals will lyse bacteria, which means that it disrupts the cell membrane. So basically it causes the cells to spill their guts. But we're usually not permitted to get a high enough metal level in the water to actually kill everything. So we kill a little bit of it, right? If there's algae present. It's good for an algistat, but otherwise, if we're looking to kill, we can't add enough to be a lethal dose for the algae because the EPA drinking water standards are at a certain point. Plus, then we do have that possibility of staining, just in case you just dump a lot in without measuring it.
Which is definitely not what I did.
So with that, copper, the maximum acceptable level for copper is 1 part per million. You can't exceed that.
And that is I'm sorry. The standard for drinking water is lower
1.3. 1.3 parts per million. It's actually a hair higher, but we stick to 1 part per million. So 1 part per million is the max level of copper. And what you get when you put copper in, it's kind of a 1-2 punch. Like I said, all heavy metals lyse bacteria and algae cells. In fact, all except for one. The only one that doesn't is stainless steel. So when you add the copper sulfate, it will lyse algae cells that are there, but not all of them because we can't put in enough to kill everything. Okay. But algae needs copper to produce chloroplast so it can make that chlorophyll to perform photosynthesis. So it readily takes it in. But if it takes in too much, kind of, sort of, but if it takes in too much, the copper starts to interrupt the Calvin cycle, which is the method in which photosynthesis occurs. So it interferes with that process. We're making it so that it can't digest its food pretty much. So silver, same thing. Maximum acceptable amount of silver you're allowed to have. Do you know? It's very
I do
low.
not know.
It's 0.1.
Oh, wow.
0.1 parts per million. So any of these things that you add, whether it's the borates, the copper, or the silver, you should also make sure that you own a test kit, because you should own a test kit for everything you put into that pool that a test kit exists for.
Yes, I agree.
Because we have maximum acceptable levels on these, right? Borates at 50 parts per million max, copper at 1 part per million, silver at 0.1. You need to be able to test that and make sure you don't exceed those levels. Now, phosphate removers you'll add as needed. Borates never degrades. You don't have to add more. It's one and done. You may have to top it off a little bit every now and then because you lose water and replace it when you backwash or from people splashing. But otherwise, it's pretty much one and done. So the initial expense, and then it's just tweaking it as you go.
And then just kind of like cyanuric acid.
Exactly. Silver and copper, like Andrea said, you see them where it says 90 days or more. Some of them say 6 months or more. You will eventually need to top those off for the same reasons. It's a very, very low level that you're putting in there, that 1 part per million or that 0.1 part per million. So when you backwash or replace water, even if it's just a little bit at a time, you get rid of that silver or copper level. At least it gets much, much lower. And then you get to a point where you need to add more. So those are all acceptable methods of preventing algae, and a couple of them that will kill it as well.
What about the my favorite word to say ever, polyquats?
Polyquats, how do those work?
I actually don't know. I just know that they work very well, and I like using them. Except it smells.
Tell me how polyquats work. We
I
don't
want
know,
you
right?
to tell me how polyquats work.
Polyquats actually smother the algae cells and then cause them to implode. They they squish the shit out of it.
I see. It is a heavy, gooey, viscous liquid, so that makes sense.
Viscous.
Yes.
Very cool. All right. So yes, it is a heavy, gooey, viscous, but it's the negative charge of the well, that's actually it's the positive charge of the polymers is what does the trick. So you add these things on a weekly basis. It's usually added as a preventative in small amounts, but because the polymers have a positive charge, algae cells have a negative charge. The polymers are drawn in and they surround the algae cells and they kind of squash it. They cause it to implode. Guess what? All of this is in my book. I know you have a copy. I don't know if you've read it yet, but I know you have a copy. How to Get Rid of Swimming Pool Algae. It's available on Amazon.com. And I also talk about it in my class. It's poolclass.teachable.com. There we have the Algae Eradication and Prevention Specialist Certification course. It's the only focused course in the industry. I think it's the only course on algae in the industry, but I talk about all of this and then in a lot greater detail and a whole lot more. So check it out there. You're also going to want to keep in mind that we don't want to necessarily use polyquats as a preventative in a swimming pool, at least not now. Polyquats are quaternary ammonium compounds, so there is ammonia in that, which will create chloramines, which is great if you have a high cyanuric acid level, because, again, chloramines not bound to cyanuric acid, but you're going to use a lot more chlorine because of it. It's going to burn it off more rapidly because you don't get that UV protection. And again, now you're also creating a little bit of a chlorine demand. So if you have algae in the pool and you need to use it to kill it, that's fantastic. But this, or we're going to talk about EDTA and ammonium sulfate in a moment. But in either case, let's not use those as preventatives, even though on a normal basis you could. This is not a normal year. Let's keep that in mind.
I feel like I have heard it. Is that green to clean
Yes,
stuff?
they use that in there. Good job. So it's a combination of EDTA and ammonium sulfate is what they use. So EDTA is a disinfectant. It's a chelating agent. They actually use it as a sanitizer in hospitals. And if you use those wipes, this cleaning, sanitizing wipes.
Yeah.
One of them not Lysol, but Clorox brand. That product is not a bleach wipe. It actually uses EDTA. If you look at the ingredients on it, that's what they use to sanitize with that product. So
you're going to make me go look at the can of wipes because I'm an ingredient.
Because you just don't take my word for it, but that's fine.
No, because I want to see
anyway.
it for myself.
In a swimming pool, it also serves as a chelating agent. But one of the main things we get from that is it also, you're going to love this, reduces smear adhesion.
I'm sorry, what?
Smear.
What is that?
Smear adhesion.
It sounds gross.
It does, right? But all right, so you've dealt with black algae before.
I have.
And certain strains of mustard algae stick to the walls.
Gotcha. Yes, I have experienced that.
Okay. Smear adhesion is what gives both of those things the ability to stick.
That makes sense. Mm-hmm.
So by reducing,
I
thank you. By reducing smear adhesion, if we're using it periodically, you could add a little bit as an algistat if you want. It's not going to stay in the water. It's just going to be one and done, and then you're going to have to add more if you go that route. But it will help to prevent algae from becoming established. The main thing we use it for is to kill algae when it's present, in which case what it does is it causes a lot of it to release from the pool floor and wall.
Okay.
So that's what we get from reducing schmear adhesion. The other thing that we get out of that product is the ammonium sulfate. And what happens when we add ammonium sulfate to water?
I'm still laughing at schmear adhesion because it doesn't sound like that is a technical term at all.
That's the scientific word is schmear.
Okay.
Schmear.
Okay.
So what else with the ammonium sulfate part of that, when you add that to the water, what happens is it forms monochloramine.
Okay.
And we want it to.
In a normal year.
When we're treating
Why?
algae. Well, one, monochloramine has no attraction to cyanuric acid whatsoever, so it completely separates from it and stays away from it. So you have all of the chlorine now working. Even though it's not as strong, monochloramine is still a very effective algicide.
Okay.
It's actually what your water treatment centers, if you get city water, what water treatment centers use to chlorinate water is monochloramine. The majority.
So I have tested my tap water with my pool test kit before.
Of course you have.
And
because you're Andrea.
I am a dork. So I've done it with strips and with my blue box reagent kit. And I got a 1 part per million reading on the Taylor kit, and then I got slightly different reading on the strips. And then I actually Googled my water treatment report, from the city or whatever.
Right.
And that's what they use to treat the water.
There you go. And most facilities throughout the United States use monochloramine to chlorinate the water. So it's not a bad thing that we're creating it. We're using it to get rid of the algae. Then we shock again the next day when we use that product anyway. So then you're going to be basically burning off the chloramines that you put in.
But keep in mind, we are creating a chlorine demand when we use this. We are going to use more chlorine because of it. So this year, looking at it as a solution, at least as a means to prevent algae, probably not my go-to. Although in normal years, you could add a little bit every now and then. But right now, let's stay away from the chloramines because, again, it's going to cause us to use a lot more chlorine. And that's exactly the opposite of what we're trying to do.
So that's more so to kill it. Yes? Then you have things. So we already talked about your polyquats.
We did.
Because that's your favorite word. Although schmear might be replacing that.
It could. I'm going to have to find more places to use that.
So next time you go into the bagel shop, order a bagel and a schmear.
I don't want that.
It's just cream cheese.
Oh. An everything bagel with a schmear of low-fat cream cheese sounds delightful.
I thought it was the salmon.
No, that's
lox.
lox. That's lox.
Okay.
Right.
I've never had that. Is it good?
I love it. When
Really?
I was up in New York, every time I go up there, I have to go to a delicatessen and get Nova Lox on a bagel.
What's the texture like? Is it like a paste or is it like a real thin fillet of what is it?
It's hard to explain. It's not like a paste.
So is it like if you go to the deli and you get a slice of pepperoni or something like that, like a salami slice, but salmon? Okay.
So it's softer than salami.
Okay, but
not like.
But it's not like a paste that you actually schmear, because that's what Okay.
That would be
goodness.
Andrea. That's just ridiculous. That's it. I'm done with this one. So this has been once again. Andrea has driven me to the point where I'm completely finished with the show and I have to leave and get away from her. So, my name is Rudy. This has been our episode on algistats and how you can make the chlorine last longer in your water. And I'm gone. Goodbye.
I'm sorry. I'm Andrea and I am hilarious. Oh my goodness. Don't hate me, Rudy.
Tell everybody goodbye.
Goodbye, everyone. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to follow, like us, subscribe on all our socials.